Hey guys, this is Locke. In this video, I'm going to go over how you should be approaching doing these multi-party raids. These are quite difficult, and yesterday when I was doing the Gigantis raid, I did it with a party and the entire party had like a CP over 50,000, and most of the people that I did it with were in the top 3 guilds, and we failed often. Like, I think I had to do it like 10 times before I actually got a successful run, so this is pretty hard to do. And Gigantis is probably one of the harder raids to do than the other ones, but if I'm having trouble doing Gigantis, maybe you have trouble doing the Exodus raid, which is, typically easier. So I'm approaching this from a standpoint of, like maybe you are in a top 50 guild, not in a top 3 guild. You're probably going to have a lot more difficulty doing this. So I'm going to give you the approach on how you should tackle this, and talk about it. So if you're doing, up to T4, T3, T4, these are easy. Like, you can probably do it with random people. You don't have to have an organized party to do it. You can probably do it a lot easier. Once you start getting to T5 and especially T6, then it starts getting really difficult, especially, T6. So you probably want to have organized parties to do this. And if you're having organized parties, this is probably going to be like a guild party, or maybe even an alliance, like, have a collection of guilds in one Discord channel, and you guys start running your own raids. I mean, later on, as people get more and more stronger and you're able to just take random people and do this, you can do this. But like right now, especially, say it like next week when we're doing this, if you're in a top 50 guild, it's going to be hard for you to actually even find a party to do this, right? So you have to, probably you have to do this as a guild. Everyone is going to come up and you're probably going to start doing it that way. And the reason I bring up, doing it as a guild is because you have to kind of decide who's going to take on what role, and you have to specialize in that role. And it doesn't only depend on what units you have, but it also depends on what L plus accessories you have. So the first person I'm going to start with is actually going to be Cozette. And the reason it's going to be Cozette is because a lot of people have, started focusing on her. I've been advising for a while that everyone should be, pulling for her from the L plus selected banner, because I think she has very long longevity. So I really encourage everyone to get her. So I think, after a while, like, everyone starts getting her, right? Maybe not everyone, but people start getting her. I mean, hopefully at least 141st pull on the L plus banner, you'll get her. So by now, it's been 3 months. I'm sure a certain percentage of people, even like free to play players, have her by now. So if you have her, you can maybe take the damage dealer role. There is one thing you need for the damage dealer role, however, and that is this accessory. You probably need, you might be able to get away with 1 at T5, or maybe even 0 at T5, but you probably start to need at least 2 of these for T6, especially something like the T6 Gigantis raid. You will at least need 2 of these pieces. The good thing is the story already gives you 1 piece. You already get the earrings from the Very Hard Story Chapter 3. So if you have, and you have, you should have this piece, it might be a good idea just to farm another piece. Like, hopefully you get either the necklace or the ring. And once you have that, once you have Cozette, and once you have this, you can most likely start taking the damage dealer role in all of your party dungeons. You can focus on Cozette. Maybe it might be like you can start focusing on like a damage set. Maybe you can focus on getting like a transcended +5 crit weapon or something. That might be a good idea for you, because most likely in all of your parties, you are probably going to be the damage dealer. Like right now, it doesn't matter, right? Like if you're doing like a T4 raid, it doesn't matter what role you do. Like if you go into a raid and somebody else is already Cozette, you're like, okay, no problem, I'll just be Karin or something. It doesn't matter. But once you start getting the T6 raids, like, you need to really focus. I will give you an example later on as I talk about Karin, but you really need to focus on your role, and decide, in your guild, okay, who has Cozette, who has maybe one of these other pieces of the transcended set, and maybe those players you can you can give them the damage dealer role for these dungeons. So think about it. Think about that. Think about who will be able to take on the different roles. The second one I'm going to talk about is Karin, and Karin is actually one of the more difficult units to gear for. Because first of all, if she dies, most of the time the entire raid dies. So I don't really like playing Karin, because I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm like I might fat finger it and move in the wrong spot, and she gets killed by NOU, and then the whole run fails. So I typically like to play somebody else. But yesterday, I didn't play Karin until the very end, and we kept failing over and over. The only reason we passed at the end was because I had Karin with 2 pieces of the time acceleration accessory. And I needed that to keep constantly providing heals. And not only that, I also needed 1 revive piece as well. So I need 1 revive and 2 acceleration piece to be able to actually bring Karin. And there are a very small percentage of people that have that, in my opinion, right? Like it's going to be, like you have to be really lucky to basically get all 3 drops of the things that you really need. So I think, in my opinion, Karin is one of the hardest ones to gear for, like accessory wise. And I mean, like I tried 10 times with like other people playing Karin because I didn't really want to play her, and we just failed. It's not that Karin was dying, but she wasn't providing enough heals to the party because she's the only healer. I can't bring like Serena or Shay to complement the heals. In these 4-party dungeons, she's the only healer. So she needs to have she needs to have a really good cooldown accessory set. I haven't crafted this today because I realized that I'm probably going to be the Karin for a lot of parties going forward, so I really need to invest in her. So I ended up crafting this +5 helm. Before that, I was just using this. But I realized, okay, you know what, I'm probably going to be playing her a lot, so I really need to invest in her, especially for these dungeons. So that's why I crafted that. But anyway, for Karin, you really need a very high cooldown set. You need 2 pieces of these time accessories and 1 one revive accessory. If you have those 3 accessory pieces, I highly recommend you think about playing Karin a lot. Maybe even like max out a potential. Maybe make it like 15 defense, 15 HP, because you're most likely in your guild, like if you're not in like the top 10 guilds or something, you're probably going to be a person that is going to play Karin for most of these raids, because it's really hard to get all the 3 things that you really need line up like that. Next, we're going to talk about the suppressors and the resistance heroes, and really it depends dungeon by dungeon. If you talk about the Gigantis raid, the suppressor hero for that raid, let me just go into it and talk about it. So Gigantis, let me do this. Maybe it's easier if I do this so we have a visual. So let me find Gigantis. There he is. Okay. So if you're playing Gigantis in this raid, in my opinion, this is one of the hardest roles alongside Karin to play, because you're going to be the one tanking the hits from Gigantis, and he does the most damage out of any of these raids. So you really need to have, you want to have 1 revive, 1 rage piece, and 1 time acceleration piece on him, because he will die, because he's not really built as a tank. He's a universal type of character. So if you're trying to tank with him, it's very often that you just take a lot of damage. So I was able to as Karin and providing a lot of heals, I was able to keep my my tank, my Gui alive. But in most cases, like he's gonna have a hard time unless you have like 1 revive, 1 rage, and 1 time acceleration. And the reason you want the time acceleration is to cool down his skills, because one of his skills gives him his own heal. So by giving cooldowns on him, he's able to bring the he's able to keep himself alive a little bit longer. And the reason that this is really hard to do as well is because you can't put a defense set on him. You have to put a skill up set, because if you don't bring a skill up set, you're going to die to burn. Your whole party's going to die to burn damage. So this is why, in my opinion, this is one of the harder roles to fill on this team. The next role on this team, in my opinion, is one of the easier ones. Let me hold on. Okay. And the next role is the suppressor, Len. So here, basically, you just want to keep her alive. So you can bring whatever, like you can bring a defense set on her. You don't really have to do extra damage. Like if Cozette is struggling to deal damage, then maybe you might think of outfitting Len to also do some damage. But I find that if she's alive to do the suppression, that's usually enough. Like the percentage of damage that my Len does, even with like maxed out like a +5 transcended crit set compared to Cozette, is like very minuscule, especially if Cozette is geared properly with the 2 transcended pieces I talked about. So Len then becomes like she just needs to be alive. As long as she's alive to do the suppression when the boss casts that skill, you've done your job. So if you're able to do that while having like an attack set, that's great. But if you can't, then maybe you can bring a defense set and even defensive accessories to make sure you're alive to do that. So for people that are having a hard time doing this raid, maybe this is the role that you can go for, because this is one of the, in my opinion, the easiest of the 4 roles to fulfill for this raid. So next, I'm going to talk about the Daybreak Exodus dungeon. Now, if you ever a Rudy, like a Knight of Light Rudy, the Legendary Plus Rudy, you probably want to take this role. Thankfully, it's one of the easiest ones for multiple roles, actually, and this Rudy also has a couple of shields. So in addition to Karin giving him shields, he's able to stay alive a little bit longer because he's able to give himself shields, and being a Legendary Plus unit, he also has higher defense than some of the other, other tanks and other units that you take to other raids. So if you have him, think about taking the tank role on for this raid often, because not everybody has a Legendary Plus Rudy. So if you have him, ease the burden on the other ones. Don't let them bring a blue Rudy. You bring your Legendary Plus Rudy and, take on that tank role. If you are playing as Karin in this raid, you actually have a little bit easier time because you don't need to provide as many heals to the team, simply because the Legendary Plus Rudy is able to bring a team-wide shield. So your heals are a little bit less needed. So the Karin for this raid doesn't have as much of a accessory requirement as the Karin for the other raids. So if you have a low tier Karin, like if you don't have the 2 pieces of time acceleration, maybe you only have 1 or something, you can still bring her here. Even if you have maybe 0, you can still bring her here, and you might be able to do it because it's the requirement for this one is lower, simply because the Legendary Plus Rudy is around. The next one, Cozette is the same for all of these raids. So I'm not going to talk about her for everyone, but yeah, she's going to be the damage dealer of choice for this one. And finally, you have the Green Henry. So here, you have to bring the skill up set on him because you really want, the resistance. But aside from that, you don't really care about the damage that he does. It is very minuscule compared to the damage that all the other the real damage dealer like Cozette or even Shane Plus will do. So you really just want him to be alive. So if you need to bring like defensive accessories, like maybe like that accessory that reduces damage, I think it's called Lazardia accessory or something, like each piece reduces damage received by a percentage, maybe you can bring that. Like you really just want him to stay alive so that your team doesn't die from being paralyzed. But aside from that, it's not as hard as bringing like Gui, because you're not expecting him to tank. You're not expecting him to take the bulk of the damage. Rudy is. So it's definitely easier. So as you can see, like all 4 roles for the Exodus raid is a lot easier than the Gigantis raid. So, maybe if you are a guild that's a little bit, lower, like you're not one of the top guilds, maybe you're in like a top 100 guild or something, maybe this is one of the raids that you as a guild can start focusing on, because it's one of the easiest ones to do. Next is the Lazardia raid. So here, Karin again is going to have a hard time because she's the only healer, and the boss does a lot of AoEs. She spawns pools all over the place, and sometimes, like, even as soon as she spawns the pool, you run out, you're still taking some damage. So you want to constantly be providing heals, and to do that, you really want to bring at least like 2 pieces of time acceleration on your Karin. It's still possible to do it without the optimal setup that I'm talking about, but it's really, really difficult. I'm just speaking from experience from playing with the guys yesterday. That was my experience, so I'm expecting that other people will have similar experiences as well, especially like newer players or players that are not at the top of their game, at the highest tiers. When you guys get there, when you guys start getting to this spot, I think you will start finding that it's difficult and how to approach it. So anyway, Karin, again, one of the hardest roles here. Rachel is like she also has a tough job because she is the main tank now, and she is not really a tank. She's a DPS unit, but she's going to be the acting tank on this raid. And it's also a little bit hard. Everyone has Rachel, but you really want to have at least 1 rage and 1 revive accessory on her, because I would expect her to die quite often, because not only is she taking the bulk of the damage, but the Lazardia hits pretty hard, and unless you're very, very careful to dodge these, like you might want to just bring you might want to bring a Rachel that has a rage and revive accessory to make the runs a little bit safer, and you have a little bit more leeway to do the raid. The third piece that you can bring in an optimal Rachel is a time acceleration, because she has a shield that she can give herself to give, to increase her survivability. As long as she has that shield, she survives better. And having a time acceleration accessory means that she can use that shield more often. You might even want to bring like a defensive armor piece on her. You don't have to bring like an attack set. You can bring a defense set or something to increase her survivability a bit more. Ian is the same as Henry that I spoke about. Like basically everything I said about Henry in the Exodus raid will apply to Ian on this raid. There is he. There he is. And finally, again, Cozette is the same as the others. I'm not going to go into Cozette because the setup that I talked about is basically standard for Cozette in all of these raids. And finally, the last raid that I'm going to talk about is going to be the Dunfrost Fortress. Here, you actually have a little bit leeway with your Cozette. Like if you don't have a Cozette with 2 pieces of transcendent gear, like the 2 pieces of transcendent accessories, you might be able to get away with 1, as long as you have somebody else in your party able to play a very good Shane. So between Cozette and Shane, you need to have enough DPS, and you need to be able to kill those crystals, those 3 crystals that spawn, because if you don't kill them, it's going to be really, really hard to do the raid. So as soon as they spawn, you need to change your target and kill those, and then come back to attacking the boss. But it's slightly easier simply because you have two good DPSs. The hardest one to bring on this raid will be Adele. So this is Adele. And he is a green tank. I mean, he's a little bit more tanky than Gui, but it's still a little bit, difficult to bring him, and he might die easily. So again, the recommended way to bring him is to bring 1 rage and 1 revive accessory on him. And of course, you need to bring a very good Karin as well. Hopefully a Karin that has maybe 2 pieces of the time acceleration that I talked about, because without it, your Adele might die. And if your Adele dies, I mean, the whole team will die because they will get frozen and the run will fail. So as I mentioned earlier, like Karin is really, really hard to gear for. Like everyone has her because everyone was given her for free on the 7th day. So by now you probably have a very high level Karin, because you're able to farm shards for free, and the game's been out for 3 months. If you've been playing since day 1, you probably have a very high level Karin, like maybe 44 or 46 Karin or something, as long as you've been buying your shards every day since then. Maybe you've not been, so maybe you only have a level 40 Karin or something. But you can't just bring any Karin, unfortunately, to these T6 raids. You need to have Karin with these time acceleration accessories, and you need to bring a Cozette with these transcended accessories. Thankfully, you only need 1 transcended, not 2. But as you can see, like you really need to have specialized roles. For the 8-man raids, this was not the case, because if somebody is slacking a little bit, somebody else can pick up the slack. If Karin is not healing enough, Shay is there to help her out. If Cozette is not dealing enough damage, you can bring a 2nd and 3rd damage dealer to ease the burn a little bit, right? But you can't really do that, unfortunately, with the 4-man raid, because everyone has a very specific job. You only have 1 damage dealer, you only have 1 healer, and you have 1 suppressor and 1 resistance heroes, and all of those 4 heroes have to do the specific job. Otherwise, you might have a tough time doing this raid. And obviously, as you start getting up there, like when you fill out your codex buffs and get everything set, and everyone is level 50, you have all the plus 20 transcend 5 radiant gears. If you have things like that, of course this becomes a lot easier, but it'll be quite a bit of time before you get there, especially if you're in a lower guild. So hopefully these tips help you to do these raids and tell you how to approach them, and you guys can start hopefully doing these sometime soon. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have other questions or comments, leave them down below and I'll do my best to help you guys out. Take care now.